I'm George Curtis. Welcome to It's Your Environment. Each week it's my privilege to bring you guests that teach all of us about our environment. They don't always agree, and I don't always agree with them, but we always learn something from them because everyone can go to a place that someone else has gone to and have a different take on it. And my favorite subject is Alaska. Those of you who follow this show know that. Alaska is so big. I've probably been there 20 times, and some people who haven't been there say, well, then you know Alaska. No, I don't know 1% of 1% of 1% of Alaska. If you took Alaska and draped it over the United States, it would stick out on three sides. It's double the size of Texas, and it must have at least 3 or 4 different climates and so much different terrain. And so when we have a chance to talk to somebody who really does know Alaska, we jump at it. And that's what we have today. We're going to learn something about Alaska from somebody who can't get it out of her system and doesn't want to. Her name is Susan Campbell. She's the daughter of Dick Campbell, somebody many of you know because he was the CEO of the YMCA here in Oshkosh, and he's very much civically involved in the community and does so many things for all of us. Well, his daughter's apparently a chip off the old block, and she's here on vacation, but she's going to give us a little bit of that time. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, George. Nice to be here.
You teach school in Fairbanks, Alaska.
I do. I teach at a public elementary school there. I've been there for 23 years.
What brought you to Alaska at first?
Well, I went to Alaska the first time to backpack and kayak one summer, and then I came back to Minnesota and Wisconsin, and I always knew I'd go back, and I went for the adventure of it and thought I would go back and see if I could get a job teaching, which I did, and I thought, I would stay maybe 3 or 5 years and come back to the Midwest. And once I was there a few years, I just stayed, and 23 years later, I'm still there.
Well, why Fairbanks? Fairbanks is very different from the areas that I have spent a lot of time on the coast and the islands and that sort of thing. Tell us what's special about Fairbanks.
Well, Fairbanks is right in the center of Alaska, and so it's a hub for interior Alaska. It's situated in the Tanana River Valley. It's a town of about 30,000 people, but the surrounding area, what we call the Borough, is about 90,000 people. It has a great university. The University of Alaska Fairbanks has about 11,000 students. They have a world-class museum there. It's just a town with a lot of independent, adventurous people, and the talent of the people there is amazing, and a community that I just have really grown to love, and it's home for me.
Well, that university is fantastic. At one time, I actually was going to attend that university. Some woman talked me out of it, and I came back here. But whenever my family goes north, we go to that university and see a fantastic museum. Can you tell us about that museum?
Oh, at the Museum of the North. It's a world-class museum. It's, in fact, they've just made a huge addition to it, and they have artifacts from all over the Arctic. They have the artwork from all over Alaska. They do amazing education programs for kids and families. It's just a world-class museum, and I can see why it's a really highlight in your memory of being there.
The educational system. You obviously been teaching there, 20-odd years? Tell us, how is it different, if it is, from Minnesota and Wisconsin?
Well, our Fairbanks North Star Borough School District is in charge of the whole borough, which down here you would call it a county, but it's 7,000 square miles. Our borough is pretty big, and but it's a lot like here. We have a school board, a superintendent. We have, I think, 15 elementary schools, 5 high schools in the borough. But out in the outlying villages, there's lots of villages which are not on the road system. You can only get to them by flying or by boat. And so all those distant villages would have their own school systems. So I don't know that it's that different. I mean, in any given community, you would find a lot of diversity. But teaching in Fairbanks for me has been really great. I found the schools there are really awesome and really quality people and really dedicated to education. So that's one reason why I've stayed too. I really love teaching there.
this may be the wrong subject at the right time, but Alaskan politics are intense, aren't they?
They are. Lots of independent people there, real independent thinkers, yes.
I usually get newspapers for my son in the summer, and every once in a while I get taken and I subscribe to a paper from Alaska for a year or two, and the politics are so incredibly intense. What are some of the controversies that just won't quit?
Oh, well, big controversy is drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. That's been going on for decades, and that doesn't stop. The controversy over mining, the environmental aspects, the pros and cons of mining all over Alaska. We have lots of natural resources, gold, coal, timber, fish, salmon. So, of course, in any issue like that, you'll have a wide spectrum of people that are for or against any array of ideas about how to use those things.
And in some places, if an outsider like me comes in and mentions that he's an environmentalist, he might not be served that meal.
In some places, you might not, right. I think for the most part, at least people that I know, and people are respectful of each other, knowing that there's a diversity of opinions, but it's very divided, and you can have many heated discussions at potlucks about any one of those issues we just mentioned. So.
You plan on staying a year or two. You're still there in 20-some years, and you're going back.
Yeah.
What's the magnet?
Fairbanks, or Alaska, is a very unique place. It's a land of extremes, extreme geography, extreme climate, extreme opportunities. You know, in the summer in Fairbanks, it's almost 24 hours of daylight. And then in December in Fairbanks, it's almost 24 hours of darkness. We had last winter, I think the coldest was minus 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and in the summer it can get up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's just, it's extremes, and I really find the adventure that you can have in Alaska is limitless.
Let's take a break.
Okay.
We're just warmed up, but these segments go in a hurry, and we're going to have your dad in here for a segment.
Okay.
And when we come back, I'm going to be asking you about some of the adventures that you have done in the summer, camping, the Brooks Ranges, and some of the places that you have gone, and people will be excited to hear about that.
Okay, thanks.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm George Curtis, and I'm talking about my favorite subject, and I've got some real help here. My longtime friend Dick Campbell is here, and Dick,
George.
it's great to have you on the show.
George, it's good to be here.
You allowed me to maintain a membership with the local Y in spite of my outburst and poor sportsmanship. How many years?
I won't comment on that.
All right. And I told my wife Suzette last night I always loved Dick because he was the only guy whose shot I could block. We did play a little basketball
We sure
over the
did,
years.
and had a good time.
I don't think there are many people watching this show that aren't going to know you, but tell us just a little bit about your career and your career after your career.
Well, my working career started with 3 years in the United States Air Force as a pilot back in the mid-50s, 1954 to 57. Got out of the Air Force and got hooked up with the YMCA down in Indianapolis, Indiana, and spent the next 35 years with the YMCA in Indianapolis, in Milwaukee, and Racine, and the last 22 years as the director of the Oshkosh YMCA.
And when you retired, you just got geared up and kept running, didn't you?
Well, yes, and I'm a good friend of one of my favorite all-time people was my high school basketball and baseball coach. Came up for a little gathering we had when I retired, and he said, "Dick, you're not retiring, you're graduating to the next episode in your life." And I firmly believe that, getting involved, and my mother always told me to be useful. As Susan would tell you the same thing. And
right.
I've tried to be useful.
Let's be specific because you're being very useful. Tell us what you're doing.
Well, I'm involved as with the Oshkosh Chamber of Commerce as a member of SCORE, where we do counseling to help people with entrepreneurship. And I'm a roving reader with the library and the Oshkosh school system because I love to read, and I like to encourage the idea with kids, especially the importance of reading.
And you put on some programs. Could you give us the
I
subjects?
do. One of the things I've been doing in the last 12 years around history programs of my interest. I like to think of I'm a student of history, and there's been 5 subjects that I've put together PowerPoint presentations. They range from the Lewis and Clark Expedition Trail, the Oregon Trail back in the mid-1800s, the Klondike Gold Rush of 1896 up in the Yukon and Alaska, a great program on Ernest Shackleton's voyage to the Antarctic back in 1914, a great survival and leadership story. And then most recently, the history story of the raising of the P-38 Glacier Girl out of the Greenland ice cap after being there for 50 years. And these are all about 35, 40-minute presentations with pictures that I've been doing.
Well, we're going to get you back to do a show on one or more of those, but right today we want you to talk about Alaska, because you've got a perspective of it. We meet about once a year and we chat about your next trip or your last trip to go up to see Susan, and you always tell me when you went, and it's normally in the winter when it's dark up there in Fairbanks, and I want to know about the accident. What happened to you?
Well, we go up there, my wife Marilyn and I go up to Alaska because of Susan and her husband Keith, and that's been our reason for initially going up there. But Alaska, and Susan shared with you, is just a wonderful place for people getting together, which really is an attraction for me. The people there are just great to be with. There's a lot going on even in the winter. We go up in February normally, and many people ask me, why don't you go south? But no, we prefer to going up in February, and there's what's going on in Fairbanks in February? Well, a little bit as Susan alluded to, there's something going on every day and every night in Fairbanks. My real good memories are of having the opportunity to fly with Susan's husband Keith, all in his private, in his PA-12 airplane as a bush pilot, all over Alaska, landing on glaciers in the wintertime and flying just all over the interior of Alaska. That's been a great memory for me. And
Your favorite way of getting to Alaska?
we fly. My dream, what's the bucket list? On my bucket list is to drive the Yukon Highway, which I have not done yet. We fly from Wisconsin up to Minneapolis, to Seattle or Anchorage, and then fly into Fairbanks.
But I understand that you have taken the Inside Passage.
Oh, my favorite was our very first trip, up the Inside Passage on the Alaska ferry boat system. Not a cruise ship. It's about a four-day, 4-night trip, and you spend a brief time in Ketchikan, Wrangell, Petersburg, Sitka, Juneau, and then we ended up in Skagway, which is an amazing town to visit. But that, and I have told many people, is just a wow trip. Every place you look in, and that was not in February, that was in May and June.
And people are getting on and off at each community
trucks,
with the stops?
Automobiles and trucks get off. Trucks and automobiles get back on and then go to the next stop. That's their way of getting from one place or another, because there's no road system in that particular area of Alaska. So
You're
that's
meeting
their
Alaskans,
highway.
yes.
That's their highway. And the people you meet on there are interesting. We have a little cabin that we occupied. Susan encouraged me originally to sleep on the upper deck, and I think you've done that. Well, Marilyn and I were not interested in getting up in a sleeping bag and having somebody walk over us, but it would have been fun, I think.
Well, it's a fairly inexpensive way to
Yes.
go. They serve food and do very well. The
It's-
scenery never stops.
No, no. But you're not. Food isn't the main reason you're on. You have a breakfast, lunch in there, but you aren't eating all the time on the inside passage, which is kind of you're outside of the boat and your attention, and I really enjoyed that.
And you can break up your ticket. If
Yes.
you decide that at Ketchikan or Petersburg or wherever it is that you want to stay here an extra day, you can get off and pick up the next ferry.
You can do that. We haven't done that yet, but one of my dreams is to drive my automobile to Bellingham, put it on board the inside passage, up to Skagway, and then drive to all around the road system and end up in Fairbanks with Susan.
Dick, if you think that's too risky, you can drive my automobile up there. and
You
do it.
have offered that to me.
Then you leave it at Pike's or the Pump House, two of my favorite restaurants in Fairbanks. We'll fly up and pick
One
it up.
time you offered me to drive a pickup truck up to your son, if I don't recall.
Well, I've made that offer, whether it's
And
a
I-
Suburban or a pickup truck,
Something.
makes no difference.
I wish I'd have done that.
You can do it this year.
Oh,
We'll take you
Okay.
up on it, Dick.
Okay.
Our segment has gone in a hurry. I want to
Okay.
thank you very much for sharing
hey,
this with us.
thank you, George.